People hear the gospel message and people see people baptized for the remission of their sins to receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. Because it's just nothing better. For those of you that are new, we have a device, a tool called a solar player. You saw it being used and the buttons being pushed and those things. What it has on it is the Bible. It has over 400 hours of teaching from a school called Sunset. It's got World Bible School materials. It has materials from other Church of Christ ministries and other things, as many as we can talk into giving us all their materials. It's got songs. It's got a class on how to lead a soul to Christ. It's got a lot of great things on it. A lot of them taught by my teachers from back in the 80s, and I like to sit and listen to it just because it's awesome. A lot of people don't have electricity, so it's solar charged. It's got a speaker on it because a lot of places don't have a preacher, and this stands in its place. How will they hear? Well, they need a preacher, but sometimes there's not a preacher available. In that case, there's a solar player. Over the past 5 years, we've given out over 10,000 of these, and on this one day, we gave out about 460 to great Christian people. Whether they were a preacher, a youth minister, or a woman's teacher, or a Bible class teacher, it's a blessing to see these go out. This guy's my favorite. He may end up being the poster boy for solar players from now on. I asked him, I said, what are you going to do with yours? And he said, I'm going to go to the school you went to. And I remember looking at him going, what a resource to have all those classes right there in your hand. And he's obviously happy about it. This preacher says I preach at 5 congregations. I can't always get to them. But they're going to hear the word of God no matter if I'm there or not. This youth minister said, I have a small youth ministry in a congregation. There's about 90, 95 young people. They need to be grounded in that's a small one in the Philippines, isn't it, Brian? That's not a big one. He said, they need to be grounded in truth, and you put truth in my hand. She teaches so many children, including this one. And she wants to learn her lessons so she can share with them. Someone asked me the other day whether we really think it's appropriate to give these to women. I had Bible class teachers just like her, and they needed to have all the information they could have, don't you think? This guy, I took his picture from my friends. We took several pictures together because my kids love superheroes and all this kind of stuff. He said, I work in an area where we can play the radio. I'm going to get permission to play the solar player all during the day as we work. This solar player is going to college. He said, while I go to school and learn things, I can become a Bible expert. And I said, it takes a little while longer to become a Bible expert, but it'll get you off to a good start. This may be my favorite. A mom who taught her daughter how to teach Bible class, and a mom who wants to teach her daughter to be the 3rd generation Bible class teacher in their family. And then there's this dude. Doesn't look like much of a preacher, does he? He asked for a solar player to take to school because they have a couple of hours a day where they're outside and they play music and other things. And he said, on my day, we're going to play the Bible while we're outside. Who knows what God's going to do with all these things. And this picture reminds me, this has nothing to do with Sunset, players, those things. It has to do what God can do with his message as it spread out around the world. There was a new church planted. June Fuentes, who just graduated from missions here, has planted a congregation, the Heritage Church of Christ. The other guys may talk about that a little bit more, but it was exciting to see that being used. This is a picture of day one of the church plant. For those of you in my church planting class, this is what we talk about next, the day of birth. Charlie Sabato family was there. For those of you who are teachers, he was one of our students back a ways. Isn't it good to see a faithful Christian still hard at work on the field? This was people at the seminar. I'm going to get out of their way. I don't want to get in their way. Look at that. an amazing thing. First seminar of its kind for the Heritage Bible College, and excited about going back next year. It was held here in the Baguio Church of Christ in Baguio, Philippines. There's Brian. Brian had to teach like 3,000 hours of Bible there, and so grateful for his teaching. So many good comments. And there's Brandy teaching class. Boy, they loved his energy and his passion. Just thankful to God for these good brothers who travel the world and teach the gospel. Brian's going to have a few words to say, and then Brandy will have a few words to say. But think about this. 7 or 8 of the teachers on the solar player have passed from this life. But their work will never stop. They are still the ones there preaching around the world, changing the world for Christ, because Bible teaching matters. And as you stay here, remember, you're getting something these guys would dream of. They're looking at a box, and you're looking at some of the greatest faculty anywhere in the world. Be sure and use that up. Brian.
There's one word I want you to keep in mind if you're going to be involved in church work or especially mission work, and that's flexibility. You've got to learn to be flexible. So Betty and I were going to go to the Philippines a couple of days early, and I have an apartment over there, so we were going to get things ready, and Ed Wharton was going to come, and we'd pick him up at the airport and take care of Ed and get him up to Baguio. Well, before we left, Ed came down with a sciatic nerve problem and could hardly move for a little bit. So that necessitated the change. On Thursday morning at 5 o'clock, we showed up at the Lubbock airport ready to fly, and no tickets, no seats. I said, but just a minute, I've got my paper. It's got my seat reservations right here. They said, sorry, that's all been canceled. So the company that booked our tickets happened to cancel them all and neglected to tell us they did so. So we spent all that day trying to get new tickets arranged, and it ended up, instead of leaving Thursday morning and getting there Friday night, we got there at 5:30 Sunday morning, and Ed was going to speak at 8:30, and he wasn't there, so I spoke in his place. So it was an interesting trip. It even had us getting into Japan and having to get our luggage and take it with us to another town, another airport, and 160 solar players with us, not knowing how they would respond to us importing and exporting out of Japan. Lord was in control. So we're thankful. So all of that worked out just fine. We got there early Sunday morning, preached Sunday morning, Sunday night, midnight Sunday night, got on a bus and rode up to the mountains to Baguio so we could get there at 4:30 Monday morning and get started. This is the director of the school in Manila. Now, behind me, we'll just keep sequencing a bunch of slides I'm not going to make any comment on. Just some of the people receiving solar players for the most part that I want you to see. I want you to look at their eyes as these guys are holding up their players, and you'll get some idea what excites us about going and doing mission work. So when I got to Baguio, where the Philippine Bible College is, and this is their building, June is setting up a new school of preaching there, a new school for training preachers that will even go on and offer a master's degree to those who are interested. That's kind of the thrust of the school. So there was a seminar that Ed Wharton was supposed to teach, so I did the distinctive nature of the church as best as I could. And it was humbling to try and stand in Ed's place. Also, we taught the scheme of redemption. So started at 8:30 in the morning and went to 4:30 in the afternoon for 4 days. I was exhausted. I don't know if you noticed on the first slide, it showed several stairs going up from the street and then up to the first, second, and third floor of the building, 50 stairs. But they were fair about it all. They put the meeting hall on the top, the restrooms in the middle, and the food down the bottom, just to make sure you made the trip several times a day. Well, after the lectureships and all of that, on Sunday, Chris showed us they established a new congregation as a church plant, the Heritage Church, and he and Brandy went that way, and I went to the Midtown Church. Betty and I did. Um, Betty spoke at the workshop, as did Brandy's wife, Penny. Taught the ladies. I think they had expected maybe 100 and ended up with about 200 ladies for the activities. We expected 160 or so to come to that workshop and ended up with about 460. So it was really impressive. Went to the Midtown Church, and one of the things that excited me was my trip before that. I had the opportunity to teach a little deaf girl the gospel, and in my sign language, she obeyed the gospel. I'm not really sure what she obeyed from my little bit of signing, but anyhow, it was great to be able to go back and teach her again. She's worshiping in a congregation where nobody knows sign language. She hears nothing. She doesn't hear any songs, doesn't hear any lessons, but she comes faithfully. So that Sunday, I taught the Bible class for her in my weak sign language with the help of a PowerPoint. And I had the whole congregation to learn the signs while I signed each of the things that I tried to teach. And then we all sang together a song in sign language, and the whole congregation signed. And I had her stand up and turn around and look back and see all of her brothers and sisters signing to her and tears in her eyes as she, for the first time, was able to truly fellowship with that congregation. So thankful for that and for all the opportunities that God gives. Well, after that was over, we went back down to Manila. Next day, flew to Davao City and Mindanao. Started a workshop there on how to deal with church discipline, and then also distributed several solar players while we were there. The plan is to go back in October for October and November. Matt Sicken will go with me, and we'll work with the deaf for a couple of weeks. We'll be there for what's called the Practical Christianity Workshop. You'll probably end up being part of that and helping to teach a little bit about sign culture and sign language to some of the people. God's doing good things. Okay, so stay flexible, be ready. He'll open the doors. God bless. Brandy?
The pictures don't tell all the story. It's amazing to stand in that room of 400 plus people, especially when you didn't expect nearly, maybe even half that many. And to be able to distribute those solar players. And I'm glad that Chris included pictures of both the older and the extremely young. You know, there was a question in some of our minds as we give these solar players to that little guy. You know, is this really in our purview? Is this really what we're supposed to be doing? And then you hear his desire. I have to share that same message that mom is sharing and dad is sharing and all these other people are excited about. By the way, one of those little guys came to me 4 different times. The first 3 times I said, no, I'm really not supposed to give it to you. And the 4th time he brought his mom. And she said, he's crying. He really wants to do this. So I asked him, and she had to translate, why do you want this? And it was the same story that Chris said. I have friends that really need to hear this message. He got one. And I have no doubt in my mind that his use of that solar player is going to be just as powerful as the preacher and the teacher and all of those others who received them that day, not because of the device, but because of the heart behind the use of it. The other privilege that we had had already been discussed. It was inaugural. It was the beginning of not only a school but a church that weekend. June Fuentes and a very large network of leadership from churches. And one of the amazing things about what you just saw in a part of the world where jealousy separates leaders, in a part of the world where churches just don't usually get along for whatever personal reasons exist, we saw leaders from as far north and as far south as you can get in the Philippines, we saw them coming together with a singleness of purpose in mind. Unheard of in that part of the world. And it was amazing to see all of them working together and committed to one cause. In spite of the personality conflicts, in spite of the things that may separate them, they all had that one thing in common. There's a message that we need to share. Chris and I were blessed as Brother Garnett and his wife went one direction, we went another. And we went to the Heritage Church of Christ, the first meeting, and Chris showed you a picture of the 80 or so that were meeting in that room that day. And it was awesome. Chris brought this amazing birthing message for the church. And the people there responded amazingly well. The blessing came as all that service that morning. The singing was amazing. The people were excited. And afterwards, we had this amazing meal. How much food was on that table? It was, the table was crammed full of food. And Philippine food is so wonderful. Anyway, we were blessed. But then we saw something happen. After everybody had gone through the line, and after we had sat and we were talking and everybody was enjoying their food, a line formed. A brand new line. Almost as long as the line that had formed right after church. Because members of that group had gone into the mall where that church is meeting, and they had brought in everybody they could find to have a meal. And that line, seriously, was as long as the line that we started with. And they ate, and they stayed, and they talked. You know, most church plants like that, especially when you have guests coming from all over places, you have 80 the first week. How many would you expect the next? Maybe half. Maybe, if you're lucky. But guess who came the next week? And we're told the week after, and the week after. See, the amazing thing is that group of people had a story to tell. And they had food to share. And they had a heart to share. Had a heart to share. Let me say that again. They had a heart to share. And because of that, that church isn't that usual church plant that starts with a handful of 5 or 6 people. It's a church plant that's starting with 50 and 60 and 80 people attending every single Sunday morning. Now we're going to give God the glory. And with my time where it is, let me end this way. We have a device, a solar player. We have a great marketing setting where we bring all of these leaders to one place and we bring them together for a just cause, not only to distribute those solar players, but we bring them together and the network is forming and those leaders begin to see one another in a completely different light. And they begin to see that they can do much together that they have been struggling to do separately. A brand new school in a country that has several schools, and yet those schools are struggling. And yet every one of those older schools now are committed to doing something better than they were doing it before. A graduate or 2 or 3 from here who are committed to continuing the journey that you're continuing. Both as faculty and as students, they're continuing to network with people in a way that God is going to receive glory in who knows how many wonderful ways. The little guys, and I go back and I was so touched by that little guy's desire, the tears running down his face because I'd told him no 3 times. Since we have this ministry, because we have been shown mercy, we don't give up. Instead, we have renounced the secret and shameful things. not acting deceitfully or distorting the Word of God, but commending ourselves before God to everyone's conscience by an open display of one thing: truth. But if our gospel is veiled, it's veiled to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel, or the glory of God, of Christ, who is the image of God. For we're not proclaiming ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of God's glory in the face of Jesus Christ. What we were able to be a part of that weekend, what we got to see as Brother Garnett stood in front of those in the place of Ed. No, he wasn't in the place of Ed. He was there as he should be and could be, and used that light of the gospel in the midst of darkness to share that word. And we saw 400 plus people gather around in excitement at a device and walked away with more than a device, but a commitment to sharing the message that was there. We saw a lot of beginnings, guys. Beginnings that you're already a part of in your own preparation. And that device is, as Chris said, it's a tool that is already being used. But think of the soil that's being prepared. For those of us to come and to finish the task. For those of us to come, and not for our sake, or even for the sake of this school. It's not for a name or for a marketing ploy. It comes down to the fact that we have light in the midst of darkness. We have a message that needs to be shared. Honestly, sincerely, to God be the glory. And all that we've shared with you this morning is because of prayers, because of donations, because of commitments from people in so many different places, in so many different ways. Imagine the privilege that we all have to have those opportunities to stand as we did just a few weekends ago. May God give you the glory, and I commit myself to the same prayer that Chris is praying, that someday you get a chance to stand in a place really similar to that and to see on the face of those who are there that light that shines in the midst of darkness.